What's up, everybody? It is the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast, and we are once again in must-win mode, must-win territory. And I say we, the royal we, right? Like we're strapping up the pads and getting on the field. But the Cincinnati Bengals are in must-win mode, and they face a team that is resurgent because of an old friend. We'll talk about that. We're going to have a special guest in just a little bit joining us on the program, and everything as we tee up the Week 4 matchup between the Bengals and the Panthers. I'm Anthony Cosenza. He is John Sheeran. Happy Friday to you, John.
Happy Friday, Anthony. I'm just mentally preparing for the mock draft request that we're going to get if they lose Sunday. 0-4 is typically not a great place to be, but whatever to keep you guys engaged, huh?
I guess. Have you already been getting...
I think there was one that was submitted to Ben Baby over Twitter, and it's just like, my guy, it's barely fall. Like, let's wait on this a little bit, you know?
Yeah. Well, we're going to be joined by Robert Cohen, who is, and we just pinned the link to his book in Amazon, which I think does come out October, it looks like, on paperback, October 1st. Your boy here, who's a VIP, got an advanced copy, so we're going to talk about that really, really cool book. He's going to join us in about 10 minutes to talk about the book, and you guys got to get your hands on this. It's really cool. It actually adds in some current players, that sort of thing. So at any rate, we'll talk about that, and we'll get his insight as well as his thoughts on the Bengals this year. But let's start as we I don't want to say all the time do, but often do. Let's kind of just get through some of the news and notes before we talk about keys to a win, the two quarterbacks in this, and then, of course, welcoming in our special guest in just a little bit. So, John, what's been kind of the headline that's been grabbing you or that you want to kick us off with on this beautiful Friday?
It really all goes back to the defensive line, man. Obviously, the trenches are a constant theme with the Bengals, but after not getting any pressure at all on Jaden Daniels for like 3.5 quarters on Monday, the Bengals are kind of looking at the same very gloom and doom type of defensive line outlook heading into this week. And there wasn't a lot of really positive injury news regarding the defensive line. You even had Trey Hendrickson showing up with an illness for the first couple of days of practice. Zach Taylor said that he'll be good to go. But, I mean, we kind of saw what that result was on Monday, where if it's just Trey out there, trying his absolute best, he can only maybe impact the game so much by himself, because next to him, you have guys, Jay Tufele and Zach Carter starting at defensive tackle. That's going to be the same again this week as both BJ Hill and Sheldon Rankins. Well, Sheldon Rankins is guaranteed to be out. Zach Taylor, I think for the past 2 weeks, has been like, we'll wait and see on BJ Hill, but he has yet to practice, and it would probably be a long shot if he's going to play. And we just kind of learned, I believe this was also Ben Baby who was talking to Luna Rumo, who said that Sam Hubbard, his injury from training camp was not a knee injury. It was a grade 3 hamstring injury, which is obviously the most severe of all hamstring injuries. And of course, the Bengals are no stranger to hamstring injuries. That's what's happening with the defensive tackle group. It's what kept T. Higgins out for a couple of weeks. And Sam Hubbard has been, more or less a shell of himself in the first three weeks of the season, and it's likely that him recovering from an injury has maybe made him a lesser player than what he would be if he was fully healthy out there. So it's looking like against the Panthers, who are totally reinvigorated on offense, the Bengals are going to have to just try to win with this motley crew of a defensive line, and you would have hoped for some more positive news, I guess, at this point.
Yeah, you got Dijon Anthony. Apparently, there must be an illness kind of going around. He showed up on the Friday injury report, questionable. Joe Bocci, he's got a wrist issue. Full practice throughout the week, though. Trent Brown, obviously, we kind of know what happened there. He is on the injury report. Joe Burrow on the injury report. That's kind of going to be a theme there with the wrist. Obviously, full practice throughout the week. Jamar Chase, the shoulder popped up early in the week, was limited on Wednesday and went full the past couple of days. Trey Hendrickson, as you said, didn't practice the first 2 days, went full with an illness on Friday and is expected to play. BJ Hill doubtful. Sheldon Rankins is out. Tanner Hudson is questionable since I believe the issue he had was in from that Patriots game, the opener. And then you've got Chris Jenkins with that thumb issue popping up on the injury report. He did go full throughout the week. You've got a lot of different non-injury related or rest for Jadeveon Clowney. Ashawn Robinson, a knee issue, didn't practice early in the week and limited. He is questionable. Lonnie Johnson, Damian Lewis, and Shy Tuttle all out. Chuba Hubbard limited early, but went full, so he's probably good. Nick Scott limited all week, and Nick Scott, I think, is filling in for another safety on the team there. So interesting. A lot of old friends here. A lot of old friends. Andy Dalton showed up on the injury report with an ankle, but went full all week. Deontay Johnson is questionable, did not practice Thursday, and went limited Friday. And so you've got a number of players on both teams' injury report this week. And so we'll have to see exactly how it plays out. Probably pretty predictable and probably predictably thin, as you mentioned, in the interior of the defensive line for the Cincinnati Bengals again this week.
Yeah, and last week they had Dominique Davis be elevated off of the practice squad. They can do that 2 more times. I wouldn't rule out that happening again unless they just want to go with 4 defensive tackles this time. Chuba Hubbard, who I think took a rest day for the Panthers this week. Like, he's going to play, and he's been really good in terms of just gaining yards after contact. So, that's just try to tackle better. That's just been their Achilles heel. They're a top 5 teams in terms of limiting yards before contact, but once you break that first line of defense and get a good angle, that's been where they've given up a lot of big plays on the ground, and that's how the Panthers would probably want to take the pressure off of Dalton to make sure that he's not throwing 40 to 50 times. Who knows if he can put up that type of game against the Raiders again, but we just saw last week how, more explosive plays against the air, it's definitely possible against this Bengals defense. It's just, Anthony, like the stark dichotomy between what Trey Hendrickson is providing as a pass rusher and everything else is just so drastic. It's not even debatable. And it's made the Myles Murphy injury a lot more impactful. The fact that Joseph Ossai has not necessarily produced well enough in this elevated type role, as he's now the third edge out there. Like, they need things to change immediately against the Panthers offensive line that will be without their starting left guard and Damian Lewis. They have a younger left tackle. I cannot remember how to say his name properly, but Taylor Moden is still a quality right tackle. Robert Hunt, they see a right guard. So it's still got some talent up front. It's not going to be easy to pressure Dalton, and he looked really comfortable shifting in the pocket and making throws against the face of pressure. It's not going to be easy to limit this Panthers offense.
Yeah, and you mentioned Dalton. We kind of hinted at it at the show, the Aftermath show on Tuesday, wherein Dalton had a big feather in his cap, statistical feather in his cap, 300 yards and 3 touchdowns, the only quarterback thus far this season to do so. And then one night later, Joe Burrow does it and matches him, and then they go head to head. And we'll talk more about the quarterbacks in just a little bit. The other, we mentioned that Trent Brown was on the injury report. Obviously, he's going to be done for the year per reports, which is a bummer. But it is Amarius Mims time, and he addressed the media this week and got his kind of first real game action last week. So, what did you think about his performance, what was said, and everything from Mims?
Yeah, I think aside from the one thing that really didn't limit him, but it showed up in a negative way on film at Georgia, was that sometimes he was susceptible to inside counters. And that's how he gave up a sack on Joe Burrow. I believe it was in the third quarter or something. But it was also on a weird play where they pulled Alex Kappa across the line of scrimmage. It wasn't the best play call, in my opinion, to run when you have a rookie right tackle out there making his first debut. Other than that, he looked really good. He looked really good for a guy who was playing in the NFL for the first time. He looked very similar to who he was at Georgia. Just underrated technician at the position, but has all the athletic tools that you've won. His first play out there, Anthony, he was like in a jumbo set, and it was just so effortless how he just down blocked the guy like 6 yards down the field. It didn't look like he was breaking a sweat. And that's what's really exciting, because the great players, they do make it look easy sometimes. And even as someone as green as him, who probably doesn't know more than he does know, like it was just nice to see all those tools kind of translate. But of course, he's a pretty harsh critic of himself. He said, he watched back in the film, he holds himself to a high standard, he wants to get better. And that's been a pretty consistent theme for him when he's kind of spoken to the media. He's constantly trying to improve and to develop and everything like that. So it was good to see, all that kind of just translate immediately and everything. And he was also talking about how, he's kind of like that Amon-Ra St. Brown type of mentality, where he remembered all the offensive tackles that went before him in the first round of the draft. You listed them all off by name, and that chip on his shoulder is going to maintain there. And I think that's a good thing. It's obviously good to have the motivation. It's not something that can last your entire career unless you're just kind of like that. But the discipline and the motivation definitely seems to be there. And now that he's got a full week of preparation to go up against, most likely it's going to be Jadeveon Clowney out there. Like, it's an opportunity for the Bengals offensive line to get better, and it showed some promise there in that first game.
Yeah, well, Mims, we said it, in spring, and thankfully it's translating now in the fall, but he just makes it look easy. And when we worried about the lack of snaps or tape, et cetera, at college, what was there was very promising, and that's starting to translate. Obviously, the weeks get bigger now, and he will be tasked with, your TJ Watts, Myles Garrett's, et cetera, down the pike here. So we'll be interested to see what continues to occur with Amarius Mims. Well, I mentioned earlier, and there is a link in our live chat for the book of our special guest, and it is, I have my advanced copy again. As I said, I'm so special. The 50 Greatest Players in Cincinnati Bengals History is the book by Robert Cohen. He's published other books on football, basketball, and baseball, including the 50 Greatest Players in Dallas Cowboys History, the 50 Greatest Players in Boston Red Sox History, and the 50 Most Dynamic Duos in Sports History. So we are going to bring him on. Mr. Cohen, how are you, sir? Happy to have you with us. Oh, I don't think we have your audio. Let's see. Do we not have you? Do we have you? Do you hear him, John? Let's see if we can get him back on. John, can you? I'm not hearing you either. Are you there?
I'm here.
Oh, okay. Let's see if we can, Robert, if you can tweak your maybe check the audio settings and see if we got the right microphone and whatnot from you. But again, this book is really, really cool, and we're going to talk about it in just a minute with Mr. Cohen here. And what's cool about this, John, is some of the other books that have talked about chronicling other great Bengals players in history and whatnot, they don't include some current players or players still actively playing. And this one does include some, including this gentleman who's currently under center for the Bengals, and of course, Mr. Ken Anderson. No surprise, I don't want to spoil anything, but no surprise, the guy on the cover is ranked at number 1 in the 50 greatest Bengals players here. So let's see if we can get Mr. Cohen back. Do we have you? I can't hear him. Can you, John?
No, I don't think his mic is plugged in or something.
Yeah. Let's see if we can. I can't get his. I can't control his mic. Let's see. Mr. Cohen, if you are able, go through the gear. There's a little gear icon and check your microphone, etc., and then test that to see if we can get it. But we'll get him on in just a second. Because as he's working these out, John, who's a player that you think would be, who's kind of a fringe player that you're like, Did he make it? Didn't he make it? That you can think of in Cincinnati Bengals history, and I'll ask you. I'll let you know if he's on here or not.
Okay. Thinking in the 70s, someone who didn't play that long for the team, but produced really well when he was here is Mike Reed, a part of the top 50.
Mike Reed. Let me see. No, Mike Reed. Yeah,
didn't play long enough. That was probably the thing, right?
Yeah.
I don't know, man. Like, I feel like, you're talking like in the 80s, in part of those great teams, obviously, like, of course your Montoyas are going to be there. Of course, your James. I was assuming your James Brooks are going to be there as well. Like, I mean, I would be shocked if like David Fulcher wasn't there, or like Reggie Williams. They've got.
Oh yeah, I mean, yeah. They're there. All right, let's try one more time, and if not, maybe we can have Mr. Cohen call our phone, and maybe he can call in here. Do we have you?
We got an echo, I think.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm not hearing him. Are you?
No.
Okay. Well, Bob, if you look in our private chat here, I left a phone number for you to call if you want to call that in. We can do a phone if the computer isn't working. So check out the private chat there. There's a phone number, and we'll try and get you on the phone here for our chat. But anyway, we'll see if we can get something working there. Again, the 50 greatest players in Cincinnati Bengals history by Robert Cohen. And here's the thing with this. This isn't a little a small little thing, John. This is like 300 plus pages. So yeah, let me see if we've got him here. Hello.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I think we can hear you now. How are you, sir?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. Sorry for the difficulties there. I don't know why we couldn't pick up your mic, but we're happy to have you. And
by the way, Mike Reed is in the top 50.
He is. I was looking through there. John put me on the spot. Yeah, John put me on the spot. Maybe I just didn't.
Around 30 or 30, somewhere around 30 or 35, maybe.
Okay. Well, hey, Robert, if you wouldn't mind, can you just give us a little bit of your background and how you got into writing this book? And then, of course, we'll ask you about the criteria too, but just a little bit about your background and, how you came about writing this particular book, because I know you've done, as I mentioned, others kind of in the same vein.
Yeah, well, a few years back, I started a 50 greatest series of books on some of the most iconic franchises in sports. And I've done several, like you mentioned, I've done several on baseball, football, and even a couple on basketball. And I figured it was time, with the Bengals experiencing the amount of success they had the last few years, I figured it would be time to do a good time to do one on the Bengals.
Fantastic. And just I know there's a lot that goes into this, right? And one of the taglines on the back that I found really, really awesome was the definitive ranking sure to spark debate. So can you walk us through a little bit of the criteria you used for, to kind of, and you mentioned it in the book, but, just if you want to tell our listeners, because some of the criteria you use to, get this numerical order of great Bengals players.
Well, the first thing I should probably mention is that I only looked at a player's years in Cincinnati when formulating my ranking. So a great Hall of Fame player like Charlie Joyner, who only spent 1 year with the Bengals, did not make the list. The main thing I tried to determine was the overall level of dominance that a player retained during his years with the Bengals. So to determine that, I looked at things like number of Pro Bowl nominations and All-Pro selections, and whether or not the player ever led the league in a major statistical category. And I also looked at where a player ranks in team analysis, various statistical categories most pertinent to his position. And then I also looked at the level of success team experience while the player was there, and how he might have added to their contributed to the improvement of the team through those years.
Robert, can you hear me? Can you hear me well?
Yeah, a little bit.
Okay. I'm sure you're well aware of the Bengals Ring of Honor. It's relatively new compared to other NFL franchises. Do you have any disagreements maybe with the order of which these guys went in compared to your process of ranking these guys? And is there any obvious omissions so far with the first 10 members of the Ring of Honor, in your opinion?
Well, I think it probably took a few players longer to get in than it should have, but actually, the thing that I noticed more is the lack of Bengals that are in the Hall of Fame. I know that right at this point only Anthony Munoz and Ken Riley are in, but there are several other Hall of Fame, Pro Football Hall of Fame worthy players in Bengals history, such as Ken Anderson. I think Geno Atkins will probably get in at some point. I think Willie Anderson will definitely get in sometime in the next few years. And I think there's other borderline candidates like Chad Johnson and AJ Green. I'm not sure if Green's been retired long enough to get in though. And then of course you have a couple of current players on there who, if they remain healthy for the rest of their careers, have a good chance, like Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase.
So we were talking with Robert Cohen, the author of the 50 Greatest Players in Cincinnati Bengals History, called a little bit of an audible and did a phone chat. So apologies to both him and our listeners for a little bit of the difficulties there, but enjoying the time with him. And we did pin the link, the Amazon link. I believe the paperback is available October 1st. I think the Kindle and other digital copies of it are available now, but there are a number of great players in here. And I mentioned this while we were getting you on here, that kind of one of the interesting facets that I found about this book is, that there are current either guys still in the league on another team, Andy Dalton, Tyler Boyd, and then you've got current players on the team that are in the greatest players list here. I just find that, kind of interesting. And just because, a lot of times when you come up with these lists, it's just, guys who are done playing, that sort of thing. How much, even in short time that they've been Bengals, like T. Higgins, Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, who are on your list, how much of a kind of, I guess, a struggle was that for you to put them on the list with guys who had been playing for the Bengals, like a Geno Atkins, a Chad Johnson, decade plus type of players with the Bengals?
Well, I mean, Burrow's only been there 4 years already. He's done so much that I put him at number 10. I think by the time his career is over, if he remains healthy and spends his entire career with the Bengals, you could see him rise as up to number two. I don't think anyone will ever pass Anthony Munoz. He was so great. But I think Burrow could rise up considerably. And right now I have Jamar Chase ranked as the number 4 wide receiver behind Isaac Curtis, Chad Johnson, and AJ Green. He may also rise above those other receivers. And then I also have a couple of Bengals, at least one I can think of offhand, on the honorable mention list. I have a list of 25 honorable mentions at the end, and I have Trey Hendrickson on that list. And at some point in time, he could also move into the top 50.
Robert, when you were doing this and going through all these players, was there a certain part of Bengals history, whether it be with like positions or like a time of their franchise, that kind of caught you by surprise a little bit?
Well, I knew about some of the early players from like in the first decade of their existence, but I learned a little bit about players such as Essex Johnson, and even though Bill Berkey had most of his best seasons for the Eagles, he was a tremendous player for the Bengals in their first few years as well. So reading up on them a little bit, that I learned a little bit about them as well.
Talking with Robert Cohen, the author of the 50 Greatest Players in Cincinnati Bengals History. Got to go grab your copy. What I found really, awesome about this book is we're talking, 300 plus pages of information, analysis, etc. When you look at this, where was kind of because sparking debate, as I mentioned earlier, there's a couple where I go, okay, it's hard to disagree with some, but you do have a guy like Corey Dillon at number 12. You didn't really mention him in your list of players that you think will get into the Pro Football Hall of Fame. I know our friend Joe Goodberry, I think, had a similar ranking of Corey Dillon in the 50 greatest players that he did on his program, but and Corey had a little issue with that not being in the top 10, I think, or something like that. But anyway, someone like that, because there's a lot of debate about a player like that, and some of his greatest accolades came in the few years after with the Patriots. So is that kind of where you say, even though he was such a big part of statistical success as a Cincinnati Bengal, some of the, the world championship, another great season or two with the Patriots statistically came after the Bengals. Is that kind of what caused him maybe to fall out of that top 10 for you?
Well, when I first started formulating my rankings, I had a rough idea of who was going to be in my top 10 or so, and actually Dylan was in my top 10, but then, like as you do more and more research and you look at some of the outside things that went on during their years in Cincinnati, you make minor adjustments, and I think because of some of the controversial actions while he was a member of the Bengals, that kind of pushed him just out of the top 10. I think he is a borderline Hall of Fame candidate, but I think that sometimes the voters look at things like that, like they did with Terrell Owens. That kept him out at first, and he was even more deserving than Corey Dillon, and he didn't make it right away either. Dillon might eventually make it, but I'm not so sure about it with all his actions off the field.
Robert, I know you know who number 51 is. Who is the unfortunate honorable mention that just missed the cut?
Excuse me?
The first honorable mention first guy off the bench who would have made it to the 50.
I don't have the book in front of me right now, so I'm not sure I have his number 51. I know some of the players that I had just out. I know Justin Smith. I think I had like 58 or so. He was one of the players I seriously considered, and then some of the defensive backs. I think Jesse Bates might have finished.
You had Reggie Nelson at 51.
Oh, Reggie Nelson, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, there were a few that barely missed making it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at some of the names here. Rodney Holman, you said Justin Smith. Justin Smith was 54. Burfict at 56. Was Burfict because, again, of his some of the things that came with him and his playing days? Is that why he was on the honorable mentions list and not in the top 50?
He did some really stupid things on the field.
Fair enough.
And that actually cost the Bengals a few wins in the playoffs. That's why he didn't make it into the top 50.
Yeah. Well, he is Robert Cohen, the author, once again, of the 50 greatest players in Cincinnati Bengals history. You got to go grab your copy. We have the Amazon link pinned to it. What else can you tell us about the book and or what fans should know about this book and any other projects you may have coming up that they may be interested in, Robert?
Well, actually, I'm just finishing up work on a 50 Greatest Cincinnati Reds book.
Oh,
that's scheduled to come out in the spring of 2025. So that's next on the agenda.
Fantastic.
Yeah. And that one. Well, any Reds fans out there know that the long list of great players that have performed with that team through the years.
Yeah, that might be a little harder to come to 50 greatest on that one, just because of the longevity of the team and a little bit more modicum of success, historically speaking, than the Bengals. Robert, this has been a lot of fun. Again, I apologize for some of the audio issues, but I'm glad we had the opportunity to chat. And any other projects or anything that we can help promote for you, we'd be happy to do so. And we'll continue to put the links to this book not only in our live chats, show descriptions, and also on cincyjungle.com. So we'll be happy to promote it for you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you for having me on.
Absolutely. Take care.
You too. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye-bye. That was Robert Cohen, the author of the 50 greatest players in Cincinnati Bengals history. Apologies on the audio, but again, that happens, and sometimes it happens when it is you get someone, John, that when we get someone that comes in the middle of the show, we didn't get an opportunity to check before we hit the air, but that's okay. Happy to have him, and I'm glad this is awesome. I'm telling you, this is an awesome book, and not just because he came on the show. Like I said, 300 plus pages, and it's a mini encyclopedia, really, of Cincinnati Bengals history, and so yeah.
I mean, he's sticking with the Queen City, man. I mean, how many months of his life now have been just researching Bengals and Reds history, and he's just all over it. And I'm sure he's just doing what people have been doing who listen to the show all their lives.
Fun stuff. I feel you put me on the spot because I was trying to get him on and everything. You put me on the spot about Mike Reed. He was right. Mike Reed was on there at 3. So apologies to Mike Reed and apologies to you, the listeners, and Mr. Cohen for that omission and oversight on my part. But this came, this was sent to us as an opportunity to speak with the author, and I just requested an advance copy. And this came, I believe, last weekend to me. So I said, you know what? Let's see if we can get him on the program. Could be an interesting guest for us, and a lot of fun talking to him. And again, I can't say enough about this book, especially because, like I said, there are a lot of newer Bengals fans, some contingent Bengals fans because of the success the last few years, Joe Burrow and company coming to the Bengals. There are current players listed in here, and then that gives you a nice opportunity to not only kind of say, hey, these are the guys that made me a Bengals fan, and then you can go way in the Wayback Machine and find some of these other guys, learn more about them. So yeah, Dan, man, where do you think he ranked Chris Evans?
50,000 maybe. I don't know.
Yeah. Poor Chris Evans. I feel bad. This is the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast. That was Robert Cohen, the author of the 50 greatest players in Cincinnati Bengals history. Interesting to hear how he came to his criteria, and go get that book. Paperback is available, I believe, October 1st, and the digital copy I think you can get right now, but regardless, go get your copy. And we're hoping that Mr. Cohen brings the good mojo for the Cincinnati Bengals, gets them on the winning streak, because we're talking about greatness, we're talking about past great players, guys on Super Bowl teams, etc. So hopefully that translates to a win this weekend, and we'll talk more about that game in just a minute. This is the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast. He's John Sheeran. I'm Anthony Cosenza. You can get this show on a variety of different platforms: iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, Google Podcasts, all of them. And that is through the Believe Network and the Believe in Cincy podcast channel, with our show, 3 and Out with Jason and Kevin, talking football with Bengal Jim and friends, as well as Matt and Willie No Ball with the coach, Matt Minnick, and Willie Lutz, bringing you some insight, hot takes, etc. And we're having a lot of fun working as a crew here on the Believe in Cincy channel. We're happy to be onboarded with the Believe Podcast Network, and you have to go resubscribe. If you were on the audio side, you have to go resubscribe to the Believe in Cincy channel podcast feed. Please do so. Leave us a review if you can. That helps us out. If you like the video side of things, we stream on Cincy Jungle's Facebook page, as well as on our own YouTube channel, which is accessible underneath John's side of the screen there. You can click the Orange and Black Insider show icon and do the subscribe thing, the bell, all that kind of stuff. Thumbs up. We appreciate that. You can also catch us streaming live on a couple of different Twitter accounts too. And we go live a few times a week. The other guys are usually about once a week as well. So trying to get you some content every day of the week, Bengals content every day of the week. And even though they're 0-3, we're still trying to get you all kinds of different stuff. So appreciate the support, and we appreciate the time from Robert Cohen joining us on the program. So let's get to it. The big headline going into this one, John, not only the Bengals being 0-3 and people writing them off, but of course it's Andy Dalton coming off of one of his best games as a pro quarterback, getting the Panthers back on track, it would seem, even if temporarily. And then, of course, hosting his old team, Zach Taylor, and the guy who supplanted him as starting quarterback, Joe Burrow, who's coming off a great game of his, statistically speaking, last week, despite the loss. So it is all about the quarterbacks this week, my friendo.
I mean, there's nothing more that I can say about what Andy Dalton did against the Raiders that Zach Taylor didn't say earlier this week. I mean, the throws that he was making were spectacular, and it's such a funny point of timing that it happened, because the first month of the season has been about, like, why are the star quarterbacks, aside from like Josh Allen, right? Why are they struggling? Why are offenses continuing to not be explosive? And why is everyone just suffering from the vile raps of the illegal too high systems, according to Mel Kiper, right? And then Andy Dalton, in his first week as a starter, takes over the worst team of the NFL in terms of effectiveness and roster and whatever you want, and puts up 36 points on the road. And he does so by picking apart a defense that was using the same coverage tactics and schemes that has been limiting every other offense. And it just happens that if you're aggressive and precise and have a balanced run game with it, you can pick apart defenses still, regardless of what year it is and where the evolution of copycat defenses are in the NFL. And it's like the NFL has now lost, I think, the Athletic Podcast was talking about this earlier this week, how the NFL has kind of lost that middle-class quarterback and the quarterbacks who are supposed to be, in like the prime of their careers in like their early 30s, right? A lot of those guys from the early 2010s, they're out of the league. They're not starting anymore. And then here's Andy Dalton, who for like his fourth team in 5 years finds himself as the starter while a young quarterback ahead of him in the depth chart is struggling. And he's continuing to take advantage of opportunities. And while that is all happening, you have Joe Burrow in the Bengals, who is playing well, at least in the past couple of weeks. He had a stinker in week 1. But the whole topic with him is almost like he was brought in, obviously, to lead the Bengals to a place where Andy Dalton couldn't take them. And then his leadership specifically is now the topic of conversation, because starting 0-3 is a borderline near death sentence. And they've lost in several different ways through 3 weeks, and many things are awry. And of course, you just look at who is most responsible, who is the catalyst, who can be the catalyst to get everything back on track. And that's why I think Burrow was asked this week about how can he better lead his team. And he basically, as candor as he usually is, talked about how he has to evolve as a leader and how he has to speak up more, because you have several voices from past good teams who are now no longer on the team, and the younger guys, the guys who are replacing in a part of the roster turnover, they need a central voice to listen to guide them.
Yeah.
And I think that's why Burrow is kind of making the changes that he's said to be making right now.
If the Bengals make a huge turnaround and end up going to the playoffs, going through the playoffs, etc., I mean, that points to one of the best examples of leadership probably we have seen. And if it's Burrow playing well and kind of grabbing this team by the haunches and saying, I'm dragging you to the postseason, fellas, that's going to be one of the best displays of leadership probably in NFL history, like you said, because so often 0-3 is a death sentence as it goes with postseason appearances, etc. I'm going to share this with you guys. We do a series on Cincy Jungle. That's the 5 questions with someone that runs an SB Nation blog of the opposition that week. And one of the best titled is the Panthers, which is Cat Scratch Reader. I think that's a really clever title. Not that Cincy Jungle isn't, but I mean, Cat Scratch Reader. That's a great one. But Walker Clement, he and I exchanged questions this week, and I'm not going to go through all of them, but basically the first one I asked him was, talk to me about Andy Dalton. What is he bringing to the table, and why is it working so much better than the system spearheaded by Bryce Young? He wrote, in short, Dalton brought competence. Last season was a cluster, and unraveling who was responsible for what portion of it may well prove a futile effort. This season started off even worse, and that status was clearly the responsibility of one strategy, the, quote, let's throw everything at the wall and see if we can get Young to stick to it, quote, strategy. Dalton, as y'all may recall, is an experienced and safe quarterback. He may not be challenging for most impressive or daring throws week in and week out, but he can still step up in the pocket and make any number of throws. It turns out that this is all new head coach Dave Canales needed. At 36 years old, Dalton probably isn't the future at quarterback in the Carolinas, but he has the opportunity to prove that Canales can be part of the future, referencing the system that he is running and Dalton seemingly excelling in it.
It's funny because when Zach Taylor benched Andy Dalton in 2019 on his birthday, as people love to point out.
Yeah, that's rough.
The whole point was to see if you can have some competence with whatever scheme and foundation that you're bringing to the table, in this case being Zach's offense. And then Ryan Finley was so much worse in comparison that Dalton had to be brought back in, and they ended up getting 2 wins out of it, right? And it still didn't make up for the first 8 weeks of futility. And of course, there was a lot more than just Andy Dalton's own incompetence there that led to that 0-8 start. But this is a common thing around the NFL when you have a new head coach that gets brought in, and he's dealt with the cards, and he's given the cards that he's dealt with, in this case being a former first overall pick in Bryce Young, and then a journeyman backup in Andy Dalton, who had obviously 9 years of starting experience. He's got to figure out how can my vision be best explained and personified in this offense. And it didn't take him long for him to just give the keys over to a 36-year-old quarterback in Dalton. And so far, so good, right? And of course, the Raiders defense is nothing really too spectacular. The Raiders themselves are not that great of a team, right now, neither of the Bengals, right? They just gave up, a perfect passer rating performance from Jaden Daniels at home in what should have been a must-win scenario. So there's no reason why the Panthers shouldn't feel confident that, Dalton can replicate some type of similar performance in that case. But that's why I think when we look at this game, whatever the over is or whatever the over-under is right now, the over looks so tantalizing because the Bengals offense seems to be clicking, and the Panthers offense, again, until Dalton comes back down to earth, which it could be this week, it could be a couple weeks from now. Like it looks like a lot of what Carolina was trying to build this offseason was just relying on a quarterback that can, like what that paragraph said, like just step up in the pocket and make some good throws. And that was something that Dalton was always inconsistent with in Cincinnati. His pocket presence, his pocket poise was never the strength of him. But as you get older and you just see more and you experience more, and at a certain point, you're at a point in your career where nothing really matters as much as carrying the weight of a franchise. I think we're starting to see Dalton kind of let loose a little bit and just let his instincts take over. And that led to a performance like that.
Yeah, and you did see different forms of Andy Dalton under different offensive coordinators in Cincinnati, right? I mean, when the Bengals were really clicking, it was the creativity of Gruden and Hugh Jackson that really kind of elevated his play. And then when it was towards the end there, some of the offensive coordinators and he weren't jiving. Just out of curiosity, again, we had Robert Cohen, in case you're just joining us, with the 50 greatest players in Bengals history. Where would you have Andy Dalton? Where did you think he put Andy Dalton on there, and what number quarterback ranked do you think he is on his list? Just for fun.
Andy's definitely a top 50 Bengal of all time. One of the 5 or 6 best quarterbacks in the franchise history, and a history that with quality quarterback play. I don't think he's higher than like 15, but I don't think he should be lower than like 40. So I'm going to guess like 26.
He's 19 and he's the fourth quarterback. Yeah, 19 and he's the fourth quarterback on there. So at any rate, that's I mean, the whole debate or the whole kind of center of conversation going into this one, aside from the Bengals being 0-3, a bit of a shock, is Andy Dalton going up against Joe Burrow, and there is no doubt about it. So let's talk about some keys to a win, John, as well as matchups and players to watch. I think you mentioned one before we had Robert Cohen on. Amarius Mims now. Spotlight's on you a bit. You are going up against Clowney. Clowney in his later years, not as great. And really, since becoming a pro, as opposed to, one of the most dominant college players we've ever seen, never really materialized into a true dominant pass rusher. So, it's going to be, but it is going to be kind of freak athlete on freak athlete, in that matchup there. So for me, that's one to watch, particularly with the Bengals getting the run game going recently, right? That's just an area now that comes under more scrutiny. Trent Brown was, there was some hiccups there, but he was doing okay. And now Mims comes in as a rookie. We think he looks every bit the part, but again, there's still, more to be seen here. And there's going to be some form of a learning curve. How steep it is remains to be seen, right?
I like starting with that because the poeticism here is great. Jadeveon Clowney was the Baltimore Raven who hit Burrow that caused the wrist injury. And of course, it's the second season in the injury that he's undergone. And it really kickstarted, like, they need to be serious about making sure that they have competent athletes protecting this guy for the rest of his career. And of course, it led to Amarius Mims being drafted in the first round. And the whole allure with Amarius Mims is that he's an elite athlete who's also really good at playing offensive tackle, right? It's no longer just guys that are just huge for the sake of being huge and taking on power. Like, you still need guys who can handle speed, and speed has always been Jadeveon Clowney's game. So of course, in Mims's first start and his first opportunity to really protect that side of the offensive line for Burrow, he's going up against the guy who, was in on the injury. It wasn't malicious or anything, but he was a part of that play, and not failing to block him on that play was why that almost promising season for the Bengals ended in catastrophe. So that's obviously a great matchup to watch, and we'll see if, a full week of preparation should help anyone preparing for his first start. So he's not just going in there blind like he did on Monday night. I think with the run game too, it's a great opportunity for Zach Moss. And at this point, Anthony, we just got to accept that, like, he's by far the starter of this running back group. And I don't know when this 50-50 type of share with Chase Brown is going to happen, if it does happen at all. But
if it
it
ever,
seems,
yeah.
yeah, it just seems like there's just more trust in Moss. And, he's been pretty efficient. And so is Chase Brown, too. And maybe Chase Brown's efficiency is a product of him not seeing the ball as much. And, running out of shotgun is still what Moss is best at. And that's been a weak area for the Panthers defense, specifically defending runs out of the shotgun. They're pretty weak in that regard. And they allow, according to Taylor Cornell, who does a lot of bet props for allbengals.com, the Panthers allowed the most yards before contact per attempt in the first 3 weeks, just over 2 yards per attempt in terms of just before any of the contact is made. And the Bengals run blocking and their offensive line has been pretty good in that regard. And this is still the Panthers defensive line that doesn't have their best player in Derek Brown, who's out for the year. So there's an opportunity for Moss to continue being efficient. And if the game goes a certain way where, I don't know, maybe the Bengals have a lead, then you can see more Chase Brown in there as they try to give both these guys some opportunities against a pretty good matchup.
Yeah, Chase Brown hasn't busted off the big run or anything like that quite yet. But when for the most part, when he's been getting his touches, it's been chunk yardage, right, that he's been rattling off. So that it's good to see that coming up. And then of course, kind of staying on the rookie deal, a guy I'm watching just because I've really liked seeing his growth these first few games is Eric All, and asking and seeing what they ask of him again this week. He's shown you a bit catching the ball. He's shown you a lot blocking. Just a really, really solid looking player to out of the gate here. And it's more like, okay, how much more should we give him? How much more can we give him? And how's he going to, in terms of responsibility, and how's he going to respond? Because he keeps seemingly rising to the occasion on, different things they ask him to do these first few weeks.
For sure. And I think even if Hudson is active, like, he's not going to put a dent in any of all snaps either. I think just that top 3 is pretty solidified. And they've given, I think, Gesicki more reps and opportunities as a blocker than maybe we would have expected. So they're not really shy with using any of these tight ends in these roles, aside from, you're not going to see True Sample out wide or anything. But yeah, like, slowly giving Eric All more chances. And, like, he's just been effective whenever whatever role he's been given. As far as the defense goes, Anthony, I think the biggest one to me, Deontay Johnson was by far Andy Dalton's, like, primary receiver against the Raiders, and he did really well. And he's going to go up against Cam Taylor-Britt, and we haven't heard anything about what Cam Taylor-Britt has said about this Panthers offense. I think they may have put the clamps on his mouth there in front of the microphone, but that's a good matchup to watch because regardless of, Taylor-Britt being in the spotlight, he has had a good season thus far. He did give up the big play. It was like in quarters coverage against Washington, and I forget the receiver who hauled it in, but it was a big play that led to a touchdown. Aside from that, he's been really good this season, and Dalton's going to try to look towards Johnson. Johnson, I think, he has a groin injury, and he didn't practice Thursday, but the Panthers said that was related to how the field conditions was when it was raining or something like that, so they didn't want to risk it. He will play, and I would expect if he does play that he's going to be fully active and able to do what he needs to do. But Taylor-Britt versus Johnson is a great matchup, and they have other younger receivers. They have a first-round pick in Xavier Legette, who's probably going to go up against Dax Hill. Dax Hill's obviously been a little bit more up and down, and kind of has a slighter frame compared to Taylor-Britt, and Xavier Legette is a huge receiver, like 6'4", 230 pounds. So the physicality there, I'm interested to see how they kind of have Dax handle Legette, whether it just be in off coverage or just giving him a safety help over the top. But in the secondary, that's where, like, this game can get out of hand if Dalton just starts ripping apart this Bengals team. And Von Bell revenge game, that's another thing to watch out for as well.
Yeah, for me, it's going to need to come down to what we started the program with, which is, where's that pressure coming from aside from Trey Hendrickson? Someone's got to supply pressure somehow, because I'm stoked to see Andy Dalton have a great game and a semblance of success, especially this late in his career. He's bounced around to different teams and he still can produce. But we've seen what happens to Andy, even with what Walker said and what was on display last week. We have seen what can happen to Andy Dalton with pressure from different areas, not just one player in one spot that's consistently providing pressure, but multiple. If the Bengals can find someone to supply an additional source of pressure whether that's a blitz, whether that's someone finally stepping up this week and exploiting some sort of weakness along the offensive line aside from what Trey Hendrickson can do. Because again, Trey Hendrickson set to play, but he was sick early this week. So, I mean, we're talking still a couple of days from now, but who knows? He could not be 100%. I don't know. So they need to get, and I hate to sound like a broken record because I've probably said this the last 3 weeks, they need to find someone to get some form of alternative pressure aside from Trey Hendrickson. They need to. It's an absolute must.
And rushing Andy Dalton and Jaden Daniels are completely different things. And I think that's why Lou and Arumo and Marion Hobby need to adjust how they attack and how they blitz and how they charge up pressures, whether that is with delayed blitzes, whether that is with stunts, and just getting other guys involved in different ways and just rush the gap and hope for the best. Because right now, you're not getting a lot out of Sam Hubbard. You're not getting a lot out of Joseph Asai. You're never going to get anything from J2 Failure, Zach Carter, just a straight up pass rushers. You need to make sure that you put your guys in creative chances to get free lane to the quarterback. And maybe that involves like only rushing 3 at times and forcing Dalton to really sit back there and, try to have some type of drop 8 coverage disguises and, hope to confuse him or whatever. Like it's up to the coaches at this point, because you can only blame the injuries for so long. And at some point, the coaches have to try to do the best with what they got. And this is not the greatest offensive line that they're going to face up against. Like Moan is still a good player. Robert Hunt is still a good player. And they're going to, buy Andy some time here and there. But yeah, it's up to scheming up pressures at this point, because right now the talent's is not getting it done.
So let's talk a little bit about what we see happening here, because we've talked about matchups, specific players, etc. What's your prediction here? How do you see this one kind of playing out? Is this going to be another shootout? Is Andy going to play to a similar level? It's hard to say the same because that's such a high bar that he set last week. We've seen Burrow do it pretty consistently. Dalton used to do it, but obviously, coming off the bench, that sort of thing is a different, dynamic. So, well, I don't know. What's your gut telling you on this?
It's like, I don't want to sit here and say that Dalton is going to come back down to earth, because I just, there's not enough evidence to support that the Bengals have the defense to shut down this Panthers offense, specifically against Hubbard. Like, I think he's playing well, and it's obviously not a great situation that the Bengals run defense is in right now. They will go a week tackling fine against the Chiefs and then end up missing 10 plus tackles against the Commanders the next. So maybe that trend is just, hey, it's a good tackling week this week. Of course, desperation is on the line. Of course, you can't drop to 0-4, and there's no team in the NFL that you can take lightly, which is why I'm still surprised that the Bengals are still 4.5-point favorites against the team with one more win and one more complete game played going against them. But the over/under is 47. I think you hammer the over there. Not taking any betting advice, but that's just kind of how I see the game going. But it's tough, man. It would be so poetic if Andy Dalton is the one who just puts the nail in the coffin here. I don't feel comfortable predicting it, though. I do think the Panthers probably cover here. It's going to be like a 4-point game, and both teams are going to score in the mid to high 20s for sure. So I'm not going to make a prediction, though. Like, my mind's not in it right now.
Andy Dalton is a starting quarterback since leaving the Bengals, is undefeated against Cincinnati, right? I mean, he in 2020 he was the Dallas starter.
His loss was with the Saints, 2022.
His loss, yeah, but he didn't start that game, right? That was no, I thought that was somebody else. I could be wrong about that, but regardless, he's had a lot of success against the Bengals since leaving them head to head, right? I don't know. Something just tells me that this is the week that the Bengals start kicking it in gear. And I think I know Zach kind of downplayed this little meeting between Burrow and Lou, saying, this is kind of something we do every week. We just went we just went in a different door or something like that. I don't know that I don't know, just my own little conspiracy theorist / I don't know. I just don't know that I buy that. I think that this is probably a week you saw something finally. There's another headline that Jamar Chase is, quote, finally having fun after a business-like offseason and that sort of thing. I don't know. I see this where the Bengals are kicking this in gear, and I see it where they're going to be a team. I don't think it's going to be a blowout, and I don't think Andy Dalton plays terrible either. I think he probably still plays pretty well, but I think the Bengals come away with a win that's not a blowout but comfortable. And I think it's just because this team knows when to flip that switch. Fortunately and unfortunately, they just know. And it would be. That's kind of my gut feeling. Score, I don't know. I don't know if comfortable means 10 points or 6 points or 8. I don't know, but that's kind of what I'm feeling this week. And call me the optimist, which I'm usually not always, but I don't know. I feel a different vibe this week just because it's like, man, you got to get this. You got to have this one.
So Dalton did start for the Saints that week, and there's no parallels here, I think, because if you guys remember that game, the Saints were up kind of early, and they were kind of rolling on offense a little bit, and the Bengals at the time were 2-3. It was a little bit later in the season, but it took a really strong second half from Burrow, kind of willing the Bengals to victory in that one. They still had some issues on offense to kind of work through. And there was that one play where he was, trying to buy time on third down. He converted. It was like the key moment of the game. Him and Chase connected for a touchdown, and they won. And it's kind of now looked at it as like that Kickstarter that led them to eventually like a 10-game win streak towards the end of the season. It didn't officially start that win streak, but it was against Andy Dalton, who was leading an NFC South team at the NFC South team stadium and everything like that. Yeah, if they do win this game, it's going to take another great offensive performance, I would say, from Burrow, just kind of leading the charge. And both Chase and Higgins are going to be important. I think Higgins may have the better matchup here. Carolina particularly hasn't done the best against the secondary target on the outside, so it could be a good game for Higgins playing back in close to where he grew up and where he went to college and everything. So if that's how they win, it's going to be probably similar to what it was in 2022.
Yeah. Well, we're going to start wrapping up here. Let's drop the mic and get out of here. John, what do you got for us, my friendo?
Just early congratulations to, if you guys don't know, like my friend Ron listens to this show and he invites me to a Bengals game every year now. And we were undefeated from like 2021 up until this Monday where we saw the Bengals lose to Washington. So that streak is over. But his streak of being married starts Saturday. Him and his wife Misty are getting married on Saturday. I'll be there to help celebrate. But happy early wedding to you, Ron.
Happy early wedding to you, Ron. Indeed, man. That's awesome. That's awesome. I know you've been going with. How many years have you been going to games with him?
The first game I went to them was a playoff game against the Raiders. So
that was the first one.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, congrats to both of them. And I don't mean to be somber with what I'm going to share and rain on their parade here, but I gotta share a picture of this guy right here. Last Sunday, last Monday night rather, we had I was talking about going in the days prior, talking about doing a post-game show, and I said some stuff had come up. This gentleman here was my father-in-law. I'm going to try and keep this together here. Sunday night, unfortunately, after a long battle with a nasty, nasty form of cancer, we lost a great man and someone who, John, when I think about my father-in-law, William Rocky Moran, and you can see there, first of all, it's a guy who lived life in a way that was amazing, and not just he's a good Christian man and just a good man of God and everything like that, but also just how he had fun in life. You can see there he's wearing a racing uniform because he raced in the Indy 500. He was an IndyCar racer. He was a pilot. He had his pilot's license and flew all over the country and all kinds of different stuff. He was an avid outdoorsman, had a boat and was captained a boat and that sort of thing. So he just did a little bit of everything. And when I think about my father-in-law, everybody has probably said the phrase, "Oh, that's a great guy to be around," right? Yeah, I love being around that guy. Great guy to be around. There's that, and then there's men you want to emulate your life after. And while Rocky was definitely the former, which is a great guy to be around. He was most definitely the latter, a guy that you just want to model your life after. And obviously it's been a big blow to our family. He's going to be greatly, greatly missed. And we're kind of reeling with all kinds of stuff. And I didn't really know how to, post stuff on social and all that kind of stuff. So I just kind of said, I'm just going to say a little piece here for a guy that was humble for kind of he reached a level of stardom in his sport of IndyCar racing that I wasn't really familiar with. Or, he kind of had his cult following and stuff. But a really humble guy, a great father, a great grandfather, and a guy who will be missed, who passed away on Sunday. And we love you, Rocky. We love the Moran family. And I just wanted to share some thoughts with you all about a guy we lost who is a great, great man.
I mean, I was going to say, like, that jacket looks absolutely sweet, but there's a reason why.
Pretty badass, right? Yeah, pretty badass, right? Yeah.
There's another phrase called like dad lore. I'm sure you know this, Anthony. I'm sure you got some dad lore to you, but I mean, I can't like that. That's pretty top tier dad lore for racing in the 500 and flying all across the country.
Yeah, he was a character, man. He did a lot of different stuff, and sometimes you're like, man, am I doing life wrong? I mean, the guy was captaining boats and piloting planes and racing race cars, all kinds of stuff. So anyway, if you want to learn more about him too, I mean, you could look in the annals of IndyCar racing, and he did some stuff at the Long Beach Grand Prix and stuff like that over the years. But he'll be missed. I wanted to share at least a little bit with some of our listeners. Sometimes I'm a pretty private guy, but every once in a while I like to share something about somebody, and he was a great man. We'll miss him. And anyway, didn't mean to bring the mood down, but we like to think that he's in a better place and not in pain anymore. So we're at least, I guess, in a way happy for that. But that is going to do it for us on the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast. Thanks for tuning in. Our thanks to Robert Cohen. Again, we pinned the link to his book, The 50 Greatest Players in Cincinnati Bengals History. Go get that. Go to Amazon. Pick up your hard copy. Pick up your digital copy. We'll have that link in the show description as well. And let's hope the Bengals get back to winning some football and get on a streak, right, John? They absolutely need it.
1-3. Let's do it.
1-3. 1-3. I don't think we'd ever be so happy to see the Bengals be 1-3 than this weekend. But yeah, hopefully it's not mock draft season next week. Thanks, everybody. Thank you, John. And take care.